In a city of glass towers, I lived in the shadows of the elite. To Mason Taft, I was just Angie, the 23-year-old girl in the gray uniform who made his bed and polished his marble. He didn't notice the finance textbooks tucked inside my cleaning cart or the way I lingered near the mahogany desk when he was on his private calls. I was a part-time student with a 4.0 GPA, but in this penthouse, I was invisible. And being invisible was about to become my greatest asset. Everything changed on a Tuesday. My brother Adam was the head of security for Mason's firm, a job he had held with pride for 6 years. But Mason wanted a fresh look for his entourage, and with one cold flick of a pen, he had Adam fired without cause, stripped of his pension and his dignity. Mason didn't even remember his name. He just saw a line item that needed to be deleted. But Adam wasn't a line item to me. He was the reason I was able to go to school. I found Adam sitting in our cramped apartment, his uniform in a heap on the floor. "He didn't even look me in the eye, Angie," he whispered. 6 years, and I'm just trash to him. That was the moment the wholesome student died, and the predator was born. I looked at my finance notes on market volatility, and then at the schedule for Mason's upcoming merger. Mason Taft thought he was a king, but he was about to find out that his housekeeper knew his secrets better than his CFO. The next morning, I returned to the penthouse with a smile that felt like a mask. Mason was in his study, pacing while he argued with a broker. "Short the tech sector before the bell," he barked. "The regulatory news hasn't hit the wires yet. We move now." I moved silently, dusting the shelves, my mind recording every ticker symbol and every projected drop. He didn't realize that while I was cleaning his windows, I was looking straight into the heart of his empire. I didn't have Mason's millions, but I had my student loan refund and Adam's severance check. "Trust me," I told Adam that night. We sat in front of a laptop, watching the candle charts flicker like a heartbeat. I placed a high-leverage trade against the very companies Mason was trying to manipulate. If I was wrong, we were homeless. If I was right, we were the ones holding the debt. My heart hammered against my ribs as I hit confirm. The game was officially on. 48 hours later, the market turned red. Mason was screaming into his phone, his face a shade of purple I'd never seen. He had lost 10 million in a morning. Meanwhile, our account had tripled. "Someone is front-running my trades," Mason yelled, slamming his crystal glass onto the desk. I was right there, picking up the shards, my eyes downcast. "Would you like some tea, Mr. Taft?" I asked softly. He looked at me for the first time, really looked at me. "Yes, Angie, please." Over the next few weeks, the dynamic shifted. Mason started seeking the quiet of the penthouse more often. He would work in the same room where I was organizing his library. He began to talk to me, not as a servant, but as a person. "You're always studying, Angie," he said one evening. "What's the degree for?" I didn't look up from his bookshelf. "Finance, sir. I like seeing how the world moves." He let out a dry laugh. "Lately it moves against me. I could use a lucky charm." I felt a pang of guilt I didn't expect. Behind the ruthless CEO was a man who seemed increasingly isolated by his own power. But then I'd go home to Adam, who was spending his days scouting for Mason's weaknesses. "He's vulnerable in the energy sector," Adam told me, his eyes cold. "If we hit him there, he'll have to liquidate the penthouse." I looked at my brother and realized the war was changing him. He didn't want justice. He wanted a total collapse. Mason invited me to stay for dinner one rainy night. "The chef made too much," he lied, his eyes searching mine. As we sat at the massive table, the silence was thick with things we weren't saying. He talked about his father, the pressure of the Taft name, and the fear of failing. I saw the man behind the mask, and for the first time, the trades I was making felt like a betrayal. I was falling for the target I was supposed to destroy. "You're distracted, Angie," Mason said, reaching across the table. His hand brushed mine, and the electricity was undeniable. Is it the schoolwork? Or is it something else? I pulled my hand away, my heart racing. I worry about the future, Mason. He smiled, a soft, genuine expression. With a mind like yours, you shouldn't worry about anything. I felt sick. He was trusting me with his thoughts while I was bleeding his accounts dry through a shell company. I went home and told Adam we had enough. We had made enough to pay off the debt and get him a new business. We stop now, I said. But Adam slammed his hand on the table. Stop? We're 3 days away from the merger he staked everything on. If we pull the rug now, he loses the firm, the house, everything. You're getting soft because he bought you a steak dinner, Angie. Remember what he did to me. The merger was the big one. Mason was betting the entire Taft legacy on a pharmaceutical deal. I knew from his private documents that the patent wasn't going to be approved, but Mason was convinced he could buy the regulators. If I leaked the truth to the press, Mason would be ruined. Adam had the contact for the New York Times ready to go. Do it tonight, Adam commanded. Finish it. I stood in the penthouse that evening, watching Mason sleep on the sofa, exhausted from the stress. The laptop was open on his lap. I could take the evidence right now. I leaned over him, my breath hitching. Suddenly, his eyes opened. He didn't look at the laptop. He looked at me. He pulled me down into a kiss that tasted of desperation and hope. Stay, he whispered. I don't want to be in this house alone anymore. Default text I spent the night in the penthouse, but I didn't sleep. I was a thief in the night, caught between the brother who raised me and the man who loved me. I looked at the send button on the email to the reporter. One click, and Mason Taft would be a memory. Another click, and I'd delete the evidence forever, saving him, but betraying Adam. The clock hit 3 a.m. The markets would open in 6 hours. In the cold light of the morning, I made my choice. I didn't send the email to the reporter, but I didn't delete the trade either. I did something neither of them expected. I logged into Mason's private server and altered the purchase order. I wasn't going to destroy him, and I wasn't going to let him cheat. I was going to force him to be the man I thought he could be. But as I walked out, Adam was standing by the service elevator. Did you do it? He hissed. I looked at Adam, his face twisted with a hunger for revenge that I barely recognized. It's done, I lied, my voice steady despite the chaos in my soul. The information is out. The merger is going to collapse. Adam let out a jagged laugh and pulled me into a hug. We did it, Angie. We're finally going to be the ones on top. But as he celebrated, I felt like I was mourning. I had just saved Mason's integrity, but I had officially started a war with my own brother. I returned to the penthouse an hour later. The news hadn't broken because there was no news to break. Instead, Mason was standing on the balcony, looking out at the skyline with a calm I hadn't seen in weeks. He turned to me, a tablet in his hand. Angie, something happened, he said. The pharmaceutical purchase order. It was modified. The unethical side deal was scrubbed from the system. It's like someone saved me from my own worst instincts. I busied myself with the curtains, not meeting his eyes. Maybe you have a guardian angel, Mason. He walked toward me, his shadow lengthening across the marble floor. I don't believe in angels. I believe in people. And there's only one person who had access to this room and the brains to understand what those numbers meant. He stopped inches away from me. Why did you do it, Angie? And more importantly, why are you still pretending to be my housekeeper? The mask finally shattered. I looked up at him, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My brother is Adam, the man you fired 3 months ago to refresh your image. I came here to ruin you, Mason. I've been front-running your trades for weeks. Every loss you took was my gain. I waited for the rage, for the security team to burst in, for the life I knew to end. But Mason didn't move. He just looked at me with a profound, quiet sadness. "I remember Adam," Mason said softly. "I didn't fire him because I wanted a fresh look. I fired him because I found out my board of directors was using his security team to spy on me. I thought he was in on it. I thought I couldn't trust anyone in this building." He reached out, his fingers grazing my cheek. "I was wrong about him, and I was clearly wrong about you. You weren't just a housekeeper. You were the only honest thing in my life." The truth hit me harder than any lie. Adam wasn't a victim of Mason's cruelty. He was a casualty of a corporate war he didn't even know he was in. But I knew my brother. If I told him the truth now, he wouldn't believe me. He was already expecting the stock to plummet. He had put the rest of our money into a short position. If the merger went through successfully, Adam wouldn't just be disappointed. He would be completely bankrupt. "Mason, you have to listen to me," I said, grabbing his arms. "The board, they aren't done. If the merger goes through cleanly, they lose their leverage over you. They're going to pivot. They'll attack your personal credibility." Mason nodded, his jaw tightening. "Let them try. Now that I know who's really on my side, I'm not afraid of a boardroom fight." I looked at him and realized I had to save Adam from himself before Mason's counterattack began. I hurried back to our apartment, but the door was wide open. The laptop was gone. A single note was left on the table in Adam's messy scrawl. "They called. They want the physical files. I'm meeting them at the docks. We're going to finish him for good." My blood turned to ice. Adam hadn't just been working with me. He had been contacted by Mason's board. They were using my brother as a pawn to commit actual theft. I called Mason, my voice shaking as I ran back toward the elevator. "Mason, don't go to the office. Adam is meeting your board members. They've tricked him into stealing physical documents from your private safe." Mason's voice was instantly cold and commanding. "I'm already in the car, Angie. I saw the safe alert on my phone. Tell me where they are. I'm not letting your brother go to prison for their crimes." The docks were shrouded in a thick Atlantic mist. I arrived just in time to see Adam handing a thick manila envelope to a man in a dark suit, one of Mason's senior board members. "This is everything?" the man asked, a predatory smile on his face. Adam nodded, looking triumphant. "Everything you need to bury Mason Taft." I stepped out of the shadows, screaming his name. "Adam, stop! They're using you!" Adam spun around, his eyes wide with confusion. "Angie! What are you doing here? Go home, it's over!" But the man in the suit didn't look confused. He looked annoyed. He signaled to two large men waiting in a black SUV. "Secure the envelope," he commanded, "and deal with the girl." Before they could move, a pair of headlights cut through the fog. Mason's silver sedan roared onto the pier, tires screeching as he blocked the SUV's path. Mason stepped out of the car, looking every bit the powerful CEO the world feared. "Drop the envelope, Henderson," Mason said, his voice echoing off the shipping containers. "I've had the pier under surveillance since I got the call. You aren't leaving here with my trade secrets, and you aren't leaving with that boy." Henderson laughed, holding the envelope tight. "It's too late, Mason. He stole these. He's a felon. And you? You're a failed CEO." I ran to Adam's side, grabbing his arm. "Adam, the envelope is empty. I swapped the files this morning." I lied, hoping to buy us a second of leverage. Henderson's face flickered with doubt for a split second, and that was all Mason needed. He stepped forward, grabbing the envelope from Henderson's hand with a swift, practiced motion. "It doesn't matter what's inside," Mason hissed. "What matters is that I have you on camera soliciting stolen goods." The board members scrambled into their SUV and fled, realizing the trap had flipped. Adam stood on the pier, shaking, his face pale as he looked at the man he had hated for months. Mason didn't yell. He didn't call the police. He just handed the envelope to me and looked at Adam. "I'm sorry I fired you, Adam. I was wrong about your loyalty. But if you ever try to ruin my sister's future again, I won't be this generous." The ride back to the city was silent. Adam was in the back seat, staring out the window at the life he had almost thrown away. I sat next to Mason, his hand covering mine on the center console. The war was over, but the landscape had changed forever. "What happens now?" I asked. Mason looked at the glittering lights of the penthouse above. "Now, we change the name on the door. I think Taft and Moretti has a nice ring to it. And Angie? No more gray uniforms." I looked at Adam, his face glowing with the anticipation of a digital takedown. "It's done," I lied, my voice steady. "The merger is going to collapse because of the leaks I sent." Adam cheered, already planning how he'd spend his share of our trading profits. But as he celebrated, I felt a strange sense of relief. I hadn't destroyed Mason's company. I had replaced his unethical shortcut with a legal, long-term strategy that actually benefited the employees. I returned to the penthouse an hour later, expecting to find Mason in a panic. Instead, he was sitting at his piano, playing a light jazz melody. He looked up and smiled, a real, unburdened smile. "Angie, you won't believe it. The board was trying to force me into a predatory deal, but someone, some genius, rewrote the contract in our system. It's perfect. It's ethical. It's exactly what I wanted but was too afraid to ask for." I busied myself with the coffee service, trying to hide my smirk. "Maybe your luck is changing, Mr. Taft." He stood up and walked toward me, stopping just short of my space. "I think my luck changed the day I hired a housekeeper who spends her breaks reading the Wall Street Journal." He held up a small silver cufflink I'd dropped near his computer. "You saved my legacy, Angie, but I have a feeling your brother isn't going to be as happy about it as I am." The truth was out, but the tone wasn't one of anger. It was mutual respect. "Adam was hurt, Mason. He thinks you're the villain." Mason nodded, looking at the city lights. "I was a villain. I was obsessed with the numbers. But watching you, seeing how much you cared about the details, it woke me up." He took the coffee from my hand. "But we have a problem. My board is hosting a gala tonight. They think they're announcing my resignation. They don't know the deal changed. They're expecting a disaster," I realized. "And Adam is expecting a crash. If the board found out I had tampered with the system, they'd prosecute me. If Adam found out I'd saved Mason, he'd never forgive me." Mason looked at me with a mischievous glint in his eye. "We need to go to that gala, not as a CEO and his housekeeper, but as partners. We're going to give them a plot twist they'll never forget, and we're going to bring Adam along for the ride." 2 hours later, I was no longer in gray cotton. I was in a floor-length emerald silk gown, my hair up, looking like the finance mogul I was studying to be. We picked up a confused, disgruntled Adam in a limousine. "What is this, Angie?" he snapped, tugging at the tuxedo Mason had sent him. "Why are we going to his party? We should be watching his stock price hit the floor." I just squeezed his hand. "Trust the math, Adam. Just trust the math." The gala was a sea of black ties and champagne. Henderson, the lead board member, approached us with a smug grin. "Mason, I'm surprised you showed your face. The leak about the patent rejection should be hitting the wires any second." Mason just adjusted his watch. "Actually, Henderson, I think you'll find the wires are buzzing about our new green energy partnership instead. The one you accidentally authorized when you signed the modified merger agreement." Henderson's face went from pale to bright red in 3 seconds. He scrambled for his phone. Adam, standing next to me, was doing the same. "The stock isn't crashing," Adam whispered, his eyes wide. It's soaring. Angie, we didn't short the stock. We're in a long position." "How?" I winked at him. "I changed our trade yesterday, Adam. I didn't want us to be rich from a disaster. I wanted us to be rich from a success. The witty reversal was complete. The board had signed a deal they didn't read properly, and Adam was suddenly a millionaire because I'd bet on Mason's integrity instead of his failure. Henderson was sputtering, realizing he'd just made Mason the most powerful man in the sector. "This is fraud," Henderson hissed. Mason just smiled. "No, this is a correction. And since I now own the majority shares, Henderson, you're the one who's fired. I believe you wanted a fresh look." Adam looked at Mason, then at me, then at the champagne in his hand. The anger that had consumed him for months seemed to evaporate into the light-hearted atmosphere of the room. "You used my security codes to fix the company?" Adam asked. Mason stepped forward and put a hand on Adam's shoulder. "He used his sister's brains to save us both. Adam, I'm sorry for the way I let you go. I want you back, as my head of global security, with a seat at the table." The non-violent victory felt better than any revenge. As the orchestra began to play, Mason led me to the center of the dance floor. The wholesome housekeeper and the ruthless CEO were the talk of New York, but for all the wrong reasons. We weren't a scandal. We were a powerhouse. "You're a terrible housekeeper, you know," Mason whispered as we danced. "The dust on my bookshelf was disgraceful." I laughed, leaning into him. "And you're a terrible CEO. You almost let a group of men in suits take your life's work." He spun me around, the emerald silk catching the light. "I suppose we'll have to keep each other in check then. Taft and Moretti. It has a certain ring to it." Adam joined us, finally smiling, holding a plate of hors d'oeuvres. "I could get used to this long position," he noted. "Revenge is okay, but profit is better." A few months later, we were back in the penthouse. But things were different. The mahogany desk was now 2 desks, side by side. My finance degree was framed on the wall, right next to Mason's original charter. We were running the firm together, and the stock was at an all-time high. I looked at the view of the park, and then at the feather duster sitting in the corner like a trophy. "The new cleaning crew arrives at 10, Mason said, walking in with 2 cups of coffee. I shook my head and grabbed the duster. "No way. After what I did in this building, I'm not letting anyone else have access to your private files. I'll do the dusting myself." Mason laughed, pulling me into a kiss. "A CEO who cleans her own office. The board is going to think you finally lost it." "Let them think what they want," I said, looking at our reflection in the glass. "As long as the math works, the house always wins." We stood together in our glass tower, no longer a master and a servant, but 2 partners who had turned a betrayal into a billion-dollar plot twist. And as for no cleaning ladies allowed, I was serious. In this penthouse, the only person allowed to see the secrets was the woman who knew how to turn them into gold. Default text. The first week of Taft and Moretti was a whirlwind of press conferences and strategic meetings. I traded my gray cotton for tailored blazers, but I still caught myself checking the baseboards for dust during high-level negotiations. Mason noticed, of course. He'd wink at me from across the mahogany table while a room full of analysts debated our next move. We weren't just the most talked-about partnership in the city. We were the only one that actually knew how to have fun while winning. Adam took to his new role as head of global security with a zeal that was almost comical. He didn't just install cameras. He created a security protocol so tight that even a stray moth couldn't enter the building without a background check. "I'm not letting anyone pull a housekeeper move on us," he'd joke during lunch. He had moved into a beautiful apartment 3 floors below the penthouse. The bitterness was gone, replaced by a fierce loyalty to the empire we had built together. One afternoon, Mason found me in the penthouse library, staring at the shelf where I used to hide my textbooks. "You're thinking about the leaky faucet trade, aren't you?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. I laughed, remembering how I'd used the sound of a dripping tap to distract him while I noted down his password. "It was a classic move, Mason. You were so focused on the plumbing you didn't see the portfolio shifting right under your nose." I saw everything, Angie, he admitted, walking closer. I just didn't want to stop you. I wanted to see how far you'd go. I paused, my hand on a leather-bound book. You knew? From the beginning? He shook his head. Not the beginning. But by the second week, I realized my coffee was too perfect, and my stocks were too stable. No one is that good at cleaning unless they're also brilliant at everything else. He pulled me into a kiss that tasted like the victory we shared. The witty reversals weren't over, though. Henderson, the ousted board member, hadn't quite faded into the sunset. He decided to file a nuisance lawsuit, claiming undue influence and corporate espionage. He wanted a seat back at the table or a massive settlement. Mason wanted to fight him in court, but I had a lighter, more housekeeper approach in mind. Mason, let me handle Henderson. I know exactly where he keeps his metaphorical dust. I invited Henderson to the penthouse for a final negotiation. He arrived looking smug, clutching his briefcase like a weapon. I want 10% of the new energy firm, Angie, or I go to the tabloids with the story of the Cinderella swindler. I didn't get angry. I just served him a very specific type of artisanal tea. You know, Mr. Henderson, while I was cleaning your guest office last year, I found something very interesting behind your wallpaper. Henderson froze, his teacup halfway to his lips. I don't know what you're talking about. I smiled, pulling a small, crumpled receipt from my pocket. Not a secret document, just a dry cleaning bill for a suit he claimed was stolen in an insurance scam 3 years ago. It was a petty crime, but for a man of his stature, it was social suicide. It's amazing what people leave behind when they think the help isn't looking, I whispered. The look on his face was worth more than the 10% he was asking for. He realized that my espionage didn't involve high-tech bugs. It involved the simple, overlooked details of a woman who had spent years seeing the things everyone else ignored. The lawsuit is dropped, I said, sliding a pen toward him, and in exchange, you're going to donate your settlement to the scholarship fund for part-time finance students. It's only fair, don't you think? Henderson signed the withdrawal faster than he'd signed his own wedding license. As he scurried out the door, Adam stepped out from behind the library curtain, holding a video camera. Got it all, Adam said, grinning. The Cinderella swindler strikes again. Only this time, she's the one wearing the glass slipper and holding the keys to the castle. We high-fived, the light-hearted thrill of the win echoing through the high ceilings. Mason walked in, shaking his head at our antics. You two are a menace to the establishment. He put his arm around me, looking at the city below. But you're my menace. Come on, the new interns are arriving, and I heard one of them thinks he can outmath the CFO. I laughed, grabbing my blazer. He's in for a surprise. I taught that CFO everything she knows, especially how to spot a fake number from across the room. Life at the top wasn't about the money. It was about the perspective. From the penthouse, the city looked like a puzzle we had finally solved. We spent our evenings hosting dinners for the people the other firms ignored. The security guards, the janitors, the invisible workers who kept the world turning. We called it the foundation dinner. It was our way of making sure no one else ended up like Adam, a line item to be deleted. One night, Mason found me in the kitchen at midnight, wearing my old oversized t-shirt and scrubbing the stove. Angie, we have a staff for that now, he groaned, half asleep. I didn't stop. I know, Mason, but sometimes I just need to feel the grit. It reminds me of where we started. He leaned against the counter, watching me. We started with a dripping tap and a stolen password. We ended with $1 billion merger and a life I never thought I'd have. I looked up, the soapy sponge in my hand. And a brother who finally likes you. Mason smiled. That was the hardest trade of all, but it paid off the most. We stood in the quiet kitchen, the moonlight reflecting off the high-end appliances. We were wealthy, powerful, and successful, but the real plot twist was how simple it all felt when we were together. The math finally added up. 1 CEO plus 1 housekeeper equaled a perfect legacy. "So," Mason said, taking the sponge from my hand. "Is this the part where the credits roll?" I shook my head, drying my hands. "No, this is the part where we start the next project. I heard there's a struggling tech firm in Brooklyn that needs a fresh look. And I don't mean firing the staff. I mean hiring their most invisible person to tell us what's actually wrong with the company." Mason's eyes lit up. "Taft and Moretti, corporate detectives. I love it." As we walked back to our bedroom, I looked at the feather duster sitting on the mantel. It was a symbol of the invisible girl who had changed everything. The story of the housekeeper and the CEO was over, but the story of the partners was just beginning. And as for the rules in the penthouse, I was serious. No cleaning ladies allowed. Because in this house, we do our own dirty work, and we do it with a smile and a very sharp eye for detail. Our first fixer-upper project in Brooklyn was exactly what I expected. The firm, a promising green tech startup, was hemorrhaging cash, and the board was ready to sell it for parts. Mason and I walked into the lobby, but we didn't introduce ourselves as the new owners. We didn't arrive in the silver sedan. We arrived in a beat-up delivery van, wearing matching blue jumpsuits with Taft and Moretti maintenance stitched on the pocket. Mason looked surprisingly good in denim. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" Mason whispered as we pushed a cart full of cleaning supplies into the elevator. I adjusted my cap, hiding my eyes from the security camera. "You can learn more from a trash can than a spreadsheet, Mason. Just watch." We spent the morning emptying bins and wiping down desks in the executive wing. While the CEO was in a panic over a missing wire transfer, I was busy reading the sticky notes left on the edges of the monitors. By noon, I had found the leak. It wasn't a sophisticated hack or a rival firm. It was a disgruntled office manager who was accidentally double-billing the company for office supplies and funneling the extra cash into a vacation fund. I showed Mason the stack of redundant invoices I'd pulled from the recycling bin. $300,000 in paper clips and toner, Mason. That's your missing wire transfer right there. We went to the CEO's office and revealed our true identities. The look on his face was a mix of terror and awe. "You're the Tafts?" he stammered, looking at our janitor uniforms. Mason leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "The name is Taft and Moretti, and your office manager has a very expensive taste in stationery. We're here to save your company, but we're doing it from the ground up." The witty reversal was becoming our signature move. Back at the penthouse, Adam was waiting with a report on the Brooklyn firm's security. "You were right, Angie. The invisible people saw everything. I spoke to the night guard. Turns out he's been documenting the office manager's late-night visits for months. He just didn't think anyone would listen to him." I looked at my brother and felt a surge of pride. We were finally using our power to give a voice to the people who were usually ignored. "We're making him the new head of operations," I decided, marking the file. Mason walked in, carrying a tray of snacks. "A night guard as the head of ops? The business journals are going to have a field day with us." I took a bite of a cracker. "Let them. While they're writing about our unorthodox methods, we'll be the ones with the highest employee retention in the city. People work harder when they know the person at the top actually sees them." As the months passed, our maintenance division grew into a secret weapon. We didn't just buy companies, we healed them. We became the urban legends of finance, the billionaire couple who might be cleaning your floors one day and buying your company the next. It kept the corporate world on its toes. No one dared to mistreat their staff anymore, because you never knew if the lady with the mop was actually Angie Moretti. One night, we were celebrating our first year of partnership with a quiet dinner at the penthouse. The skyline was shimmering, and the piano was playing a soft melody in the background. "I have a surprise for you," Mason said, handing me a small velvet box. I opened it, expecting a diamond. Instead, it was a gold-plated key to a new building downtown. "It's the Moretti Finance Academy. for students who need a scholarship and a job. I felt tears sting my eyes. It was more beautiful than any jewelry. "You did this for me?" Mason took my hand, his gaze intense and full of love. "I did it for the girl in the gray uniform who was too smart for the room. I want there to be 1,000 Angies out there, making the world run a little better." We stood on the balcony, looking at the city we had conquered. Not with greed, but with a duster and a dream. "I still can't believe we're here," I whispered, leaning my head on his shoulder. "From front-running your trades to running an academy. It's the ultimate plot twist." Mason pulled me closer. "The best part isn't the academy or the penthouse, Angie. It's that I don't have to be in this house alone anymore. You're the best trade I ever made." We stood in the moonlight, two partners who had turned a house of secrets into a home. Of course, Adam couldn't stay out of the picture for long. He burst in, holding a tablet and looking frantic. "Angie! Mason! You won't believe it! There's a guy in the Chicago branch trying to Moretti us. He's been hiding finance textbooks in the security room." I looked at Mason, and we both burst out laughing. "Send him a scholarship, Adam," I said, "and tell him his squat form better be perfect." The Moretti method was officially a trend. We were no longer just a headline. We were a movement. We spent our weekends traveling to our various firms, not to check the books, but to check the culture. We became the couple that everyone wanted to work for, and the couple that every corrupt CEO feared. We were the wholesome thriller of the business world, making moves that were as sharp as a razor and as clean as a whistle. "You know," Mason said, as we were packing for a trip to a tech hub in Seattle, "I think I'm getting too old for the jumpsuits. My back isn't what it used to be." I tossed him a new pair of overalls with consultant on the back. "Too bad, Taft. We have a lot of dust to clear in Seattle, and I heard their CEO is particularly messy with his paperwork." He sighed, but the grin on his face told me he wouldn't have it any other way. The story of the housekeeper and the CEO had reached its final, beautiful act. We were no longer master and servant, or even just partners in business. We were two souls who had found the truth in a world of lies. And as I looked at the duster on the mantel, I knew it would always be there to remind me, never underestimate the person cleaning your office. They might just be the one who owns it tomorrow. As we walked out to the elevator, Angie paused and looked back at the penthouse. "Mason, did you remember to turn off the lights in the library?" He checked his phone and smirked. "Already done, CEO Moretti, and the piano is locked. No one is getting into our secrets tonight." I smiled, the emerald ring on my finger catching the light. "Good, because the only secret I want to keep is how much I love this view." We stepped into the elevator, heading for the next plot twist. Seattle was a maze of rain-slicked glass and tech billionaires who took themselves far too often. We weren't there for a hostile takeover. We were there to solve a riddle. A major renewable energy firm was losing its patents to a rival before they were even filed. The CEO suspected a sophisticated digital mole, but I had a different theory. I spent the first morning in the Seattle office scrubbing the break room floor, listening to the gossip of the developers over their morning espresso. "The high-tech bugs aren't in the servers, Mason," I whispered into my collar mic as I polished a coffee machine. "They're in the casual conversations." I had noticed that every Friday, the lead engineer went to the same shoeshine stand outside the building. He wasn't talking into a phone. He was talking to the man polishing his leather boots. It was an old-school handoff in a digital world. Mason, watching from a surveillance van a block away, let out a low whistle of appreciation. "You've still got it, Angie," Mason's voice crackled in my ear. "While the FBI is looking for a hacker, you found a shoeshine boy." We didn't call the police. That wasn't the Moretti method. Instead, we bought the shoeshine stand through a shell company and replaced the spy with Adam. T. Next Friday, the engineer handed over a flash drive, but instead of a rival CEO getting the secrets, the drive was redirected straight to the board of directors. The mole was neutralized without a single headline. The CEO of the tech firm was so grateful he offered us a 5% stake in the company. I accepted, but on one condition. He had to personally spend 1 day a month working with the janitorial staff. It keeps you grounded, I told him, as I swapped my blue jumpsuit for a silk dress. He looked at me, then at Mason, and finally realized that the janitors who saved him were the most powerful couple in the country. He took the deal with a humble nod. Back in the New York penthouse, the seasons were changing. The autumn leaves in Central Park looked like gold dust from our balcony. Mason and I were no longer just running an empire. We were creating a legacy of accountability. But the higher we climbed, the more the old guard tried to pull us back down. A group of legacy billionaires had formed a committee to investigate our unorthodox business practices. They called us a danger to the stability of the market. They're just afraid because they don't know how to play a game where the rules are actually fair, Adam said, sharpening a pencil in our security hub. He had become a master of counterintelligence. The committee is planning a surprise audit of Taft and Moretti next week. They're hoping to find a single cent out of place so they can freeze our assets. I looked at Mason, who was calmly sipping his coffee. Let them come, I said. Our books are as clean as these floors. The audit was a spectacle. 10 men in charcoal suits arrived at the penthouse with enough paperwork to forest a small country. They spent 3 days combing through every trade, every scholarship, and every maintenance project we'd ever done. I served them tea and biscuits myself, wearing my finest executive suit. They were looking for greed, but all they found was growth. They were looking for fraud, but all they found was philanthropy. On the final day, the lead auditor, a man who had never smiled in his life, closed his laptop. Everything is in order, Miss Moretti. In fact, your tax compliance is frustratingly perfect. I smiled, leaning back in my chair. When you spend as much time as I have cleaning up other people's messes, you learn to keep your own house spotless. They left the penthouse in a silent file, realized that the Cinderella they tried to trap was actually the architect of the fortress. Mason walked over and pulled me into a celebratory dance in the middle of the library. Another victory for the home team, he cheered. But I noticed a strange expression on his face. What is it, Mason? He paused, reaching into his pocket. I've been thinking. We've spent so much time cleaning up the world, we haven't taken a moment to enjoy the home we built. He pulled out 2 first-class tickets to the Amalfi Coast. No jumpsuits allowed, just you, me, and the sun. We spent 2 weeks in Italy, lost in the beauty of the Mediterranean. No phones, no stock tickers, no janitor disguises. We walked through ancient lemon groves and ate pasta on balconies that hung over the sea. It was the first time I felt like just Angie again. Not the housekeeper, not the mogul, but the woman who had found her soulmate in a house of glass. I could get used to this, I whispered, as we watched the sunset over the water. Don't get too comfortable, Mason joked, pouring more wine. Adam called the hotel. He said there's a rumor that a luxury hotel chain in Rome is mistreating its staff. He already has the blueprints. I laughed, the sound carrying over the Italian waves. Maybe just one more project, Mason, for old time's sake. We realized that we couldn't just turn off the Moretti method. It was part of who we were now. We were the protectors of the invisible. We returned to New York with a new sense of purpose. The academy was thriving, Adam was the best security chief in the world, and Mason and I were more in love than ever. But as I walked through the penthouse, I noticed a small smudge on the window overlooking the park. I didn't call the staff. I didn't reach for my phone. I walked to the utility closet, grabbed a microfiber cloth, and wiped it away myself. Mason found me there, leaning against the glass. Still cleaning, Angie? I looked at my reflection, the successful woman, the partner, the wife, and then at the clear view of the park. It's not cleaning, Mason. It's making sure the view is clear. I never want to forget what it looks like from the bottom, or how hard we worked to get to the top. He joined me at the window, his arm around my waist. "The view is perfect, Angie. Just like you." Default text: we decided to host a massive charity gala, not for the elite, but for the foundation students and the workers from every firm we'd saved. We filled the penthouse with the people who actually made the city move. There were no charcoal suits, just laughter, music, and the smell of Sarah's bakery treats. We'd expanded her business to New York. It was the most important merger we'd ever completed, the merger of our past and our future. As the party roared below, Mason and I snuck up to the roof. The city was a sea of lights, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a hunting ground. It felt like home. "You know," Mason said, looking at the stars, "I think the board was right about one thing. We are a danger to the stability of the market, because we proved that you can be successful without losing your heart." I kissed him, the New York wind blowing through my hair. That's the best kind of danger there is. The gala ended, but our influence was just beginning to peak. In early 2026, the Moretti Rule was officially adopted by the City Council, a new transparency law requiring CEOs to disclose their lowest-paid workers' wage alongside their own. We hadn't just saved a few companies, we had rewritten the social contract of Manhattan. As the last guest left, Adam approached us with a wide grin. "We just got a call from the London Exchange. They want to know if we can audit their new headquarters." Mason looked at me, a playful spark in his eyes. "London, Angie? I hear the fog there is perfect for a few jumpsuits and a hidden camera." I laughed, leaning against the marble kitchen island. "Tempting, Mason. But I think I've had enough of the disguises for a while. I'd like to see the front door of a company for once, rather than the service entrance." Adam nodded. "Good, because the mayor just invited the two of you to the key to the city ceremony." The ceremony was a dream. Standing on the steps of City Hall, I didn't see the crowd of reporters. I saw the faces of the people we had helped. I saw the night guard from Brooklyn, now a manager. I saw the students from my academy. When I held the gold key in my hand, I didn't think of it as a prize. I thought of it as a tool, a way to open doors that had been locked for people like me for far too long. "To the invisible," I whispered into the microphone. That night, back at the penthouse, the silence felt different. It was no longer a house of secrets. It was a home of shared victories. Mason had set up a small office for Adam on the lower floor, and for the first time, my brother was truly happy. He wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. He was building a legacy of his own. "I never thought I'd say this," Adam admitted over dinner. "But I'm glad you didn't send that email to the Times, Angie. You were right about him." Mason raised his glass to Adam. "And I'm glad your sister is the smartest person I've ever met. Without her, I'd still be a man with a big bank account and a very empty life." We sat together, a family forged in the fires of corporate war, now cooled by the peace of mutual respect. But the witty reversal had one final, light-hearted sting left to deliver. It came in the form of a registered letter from the IRS. "An audit?" I gasped, looking at the letter. Mason turned pale. "Not again. We just finished the committee's investigation." But as I read the fine print, I started to laugh. "No, Mason. It's not an audit of our taxes. It's a refund. Apparently, when I corrected your pharmaceutical trade, I triggered a massive tax credit for ethical innovation that hadn't been claimed in 50 years. We just made another $5 million by being honest." Mason shook his head, leaning back in his chair. "You're a menace, Angie Moretti. Even when you're being good, you're making a profit." I winked at him. "It's a gift, Mason. I call it the clean sweep." We decided to put the entire refund back into the scholarship fund. We didn't need the money. We had the penthouse, the partnership, and the knowledge that we were untouchable because we had nothing to hide. As the months rolled into the summer of 2026, the Taft and Moretti brand became synonymous with integrity, We were the most sought-after consultants in the world. People didn't hire us to hide their messes. They hired us to help them clean them up before we found them ourselves. I finally finished my finance degree, graduating at the top of my class. At the ceremony, Mason sat in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. When I walked across the stage to collect my diploma, I didn't wear a gray uniform, but I kept a small piece of gray microfiber cloth tucked into my sleeve for luck. It was a reminder that no matter how high I climbed, I would always be the girl who knew how to find the dust. "Congratulations, CEO Moretti," the dean said, shaking my hand. I smiled. "Thank you, but I prefer partner." The graduation party was held at the penthouse, of course. Adam had outdone himself with the security. This time, the guards were handing out champagne instead of checking IDs. As the sun set over the Hudson River, Mason pulled me aside. "I have one more trade to propose," he said, letting me to the balcony. He didn't have a tablet or a contract. He had a small, simple ring, not a diamond, but a band of polished titanium. "It's industrial grade," he joked, sliding it onto my finger. "Unbreakable, just like our partnership. Angie, will you make this merger permanent? No more contracts, no more silent partner status, just us, forever." I looked at the ring, then at the man who had seen through my disguise to the woman beneath. "On one condition," I said, pulling him into a kiss. "I get to keep my own desk, and I still do the dusting." "Deal," Mason whispered. We stood on the balcony, the city lights shimmering below like the candles on a cake. We were married a month later in a small ceremony on the roof. Adam was the best man, and for the first time, he didn't check the perimeter once. He was too busy dancing with one of my finance professors. The executive's gambit had ended in a stalemate where everyone won. Default text: a year later, the company had moved into a new, even taller glass tower. But the penthouse remained our sanctuary. We had a new routine. Every Sunday morning, before the staff arrived, we would walk through the house together. Mason would check the stocks, and I would check the surfaces. It was our quiet hour, the time when we remembered that the most important thing we owned wasn't the building, but the trust between us. "You missed a spot," Mason teased one morning, pointing to the top of the piano. I grabbed a cloth and gave it a swift professional wipe. "That's not a spot, Mason. That's character. But don't worry, I've already audited the rest of the room. It's perfect." He laughed, pulling me into his lap at the piano bench. "You're the only person I know who can make chores look like a high-stakes thriller." "That's because it is a thriller, Mason," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. "Every day we stay at the top without losing our souls is a victory against the odds. We're the plot twist the world never saw coming." He started to play a soft, triumphant melody. "The housekeeper and the CEO. It sounds like a movie." I shook my head. "No, it sounds like a legacy." As the music filled the penthouse, I looked out at the city I had once cleaned. I saw the lights of 1,000 other apartments, each with its own secrets and its own invisible people. I knew that somewhere out there, another girl was studying a textbook while she polished a floor, and I knew that because of Taft and Moretti, she had a chance to be the one running the company tomorrow. The sun hit the glass, making the whole penthouse glow. I looked at Mason, my partner in everything, and smiled. "You know," I joked, "I really should hire a cleaning lady. This place is huge." Mason just kissed my forehead and laughed. "Not a chance, Angie. In this house, no cleaning ladies allowed. I like the way you do the dirty work way too much." We stood together, masters of our own destiny, as the credits finally rolled on our perfect witty reversal.